Hello and welcome to Loadstone Tutorials. Today's tutorial I want to talk about the Settings tab of Loadstone. This is where you can control all kinds of aspects of Loadstone, and any new users or even previous users may be looking at all these controls wondering just what are all of these things. So I'm going to explain, this will be a two-parter. So in this part I'll explain all the general settings, and in the next section I'll explain the output controls. So let's find our settings tab here.
Tab 4 of 4.
Okay, we go there.
5 of 5 bars.
Oh.
Signal general button.
Okay, so the first settings that we come to are general, and these are various toggles that you would use for the more
Advanced
general aspects. Wait,
Sounds. Speed. Just
No.
general button. Selected.
Let's activate
General
that.
settings. Settings. Back button.
okay.
General settings. Heading. Signal monitor off.
Signal monitor,
Double tap to
that
toggle settings.
is the monitor that will tell you if you have a good signal, a weak signal, like a bad signal, or no signal. So that toggle turns that whole system off completely. I have mine turned off at the moment.
Good signal monitor on.
Good signal monitor,
Double tap to
that's
toggle
if you have the
settings.
signal monitor toggle enabled, and this enabled, it will tell you if you have a good signal or a weak signal, as opposed to just no signal or signal acquired.
And for more information on what is a good signal or not, there it's in the miscellaneous questions. I
Yes,
believe.
there is. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can also set, there's another part where you can actually set your levels of what you consider a good signal and what isn't. But yeah.
Speech on.
Speech
Double tap to toggle settings.
will be for the little pop-up announcements, like the like various checkpoint announcements and all that. If you wanted to use the voice synthesizer well on screen, you would probably want to leave this on. I would imagine for most of our users, that would probably be on.
Sound on.
Sound, that
Double tap to toggle
controls
setting.
the various beeps and other sounds that Loadstone will make.
Vibration on.
Vibration, some of the
Double tap to toggle
sounds
setting.
also contain vibration patterns, especially the approaching sound and the arriving sound. And this toggle here turns the vibration on or off.
Point announce. Both.
Point announce,
Double tap to
this
change value.
will, if you toggle through this, this is what happens when you're approaching at a point. So
Point announce. Off.
So we can turn that off. That'll turn off the approaching announcements.
Point announce. Approaching.
Oh yeah, this approaching,
Point announce. Arriving.
arriving,
Point announce. Both.
and both. So that will control that, like when your checkpoints get announced, and probably both is what most people would want.
Comment announce. Both.
Comment announce,
Double
that
tap to change
also
value.
has the same settings, and that it also controls when any comments associated to a checkpoint are announced.
Search radius. 15.00 kilometers.
The
Adjustable.
searching radius, this
Slide
is
up or down with
how
one finger to adjust the
far,
value.
when you're doing a find point, this is how far out in your database it will go. And a lot of people I know will want to set this to as high a value as possible, but the problem here is if you have a lot of points, this can really slow down your search. Like if in my area, for example, it would not be uncommon to have about 300,000 points, so if I crank my search radius up too high, it will spend a great deal of time searching through the database trying to find things. So you have, well, this is something reasonable that you're actually going to be using.
Neighborhood radius. 500 meters.
Neighborhood
Adjustable.
radius, this is also when
Slide
you
up or
use the
down with
show
one finger to
neighborhood,
adjust the
how big
value.
of a radius around it shows. And smaller is probably better for the faster results, or anything that you could logically use. And if there's no points within that neighborhood, it will actually try to expand out until it finds something.
Approach time. 10 seconds. Adjustable.
That is,
Slide
the
up or down
approach
with one
time
finger to
is
adjust the
how
value.
long before you're approaching a point that it will give you the announcement, and that time is also calculated based on your speed.
Arrival radius. 16 meters. Adjustable.
That's how close you
Slide
can
up or
get to
down
the
with one
point
finger to
before it
adjust the
says
value.
that you've arrived at the point. Usually it's that radius plus the current accuracy level.
Comment announce. Both. Search radius. Neighborhood radius.
Oops,
Approach time.
missed it.
Arrival radius. Email address. Sean@odyssey.cm.
Okay, and the email address and
Text field.
password are the next two
Double
fields,
tap to
and
edit.
those are for your point share username and password, and they must match exactly the values for point share,
Including case.
including case, yes. And I won't go to the password option because this will happily tell everyone on the video. So let's go to the next tab
Settings.
in here.
Heading. Display. Button.
Display. This controls the
Selected.
various
Display
aspects
settings.
of
Settings.
how
Back
units are
button.
displayed.
Display settings. Distance units. Metric.
Distance units, this
Double
is
tap to change
metric
value.
or
Distance units. Imperial.
imperial
Distance units. Nautical.
or nautical.
Distance units. Metric.
Yeah, it's defaulted to metric. and that's for all the various distances within the program.
Speed units, metric.
So these are the
Double tap
same
to
for
change value.
speed. It has the metric, imperial, and nautical.
Course units, simplified cardinal.
Course units
Double tap to
are
change
for
value.
the course display. So simplified cardinal gives you 8 directions, and you have other options here.
Course units, degrees.
So that's the raw degree value as a decimal number.
Course units, cardinal.
And this is cardinal, which will give you all 32 compass points, and that might be a little confusing.
Course units, simplified
So
cardinal.
the default is simplified cardinal.
Heading units, simplified cardinal.
And this is the same for
Double tap
heading.
to change
That will be
value.
for true heading and heading.
Coordinate units, DMS plus compass.
Coordinate units,
Double
that
tap to change
controls
value.
how latitudes and longitudes are displayed. So DMS plus compass will give you degrees, minutes, seconds, and a direction. But your other value
Coordinate units, degrees.
is degrees. That just gives you the raw decimal value.
Coordinate units, DMS plus compass.
Okay.
Point direction, clock face.
That is the
Double tap
direction
to change value.
when it says which way a point is. So you have clock face, which is a default.
Point direction, degrees.
Degrees, which will give you the raw value in degrees.
Point direction, cardinal.
And that will give you your cardinal direction,
Point direction, simplified cardinal.
simplified cardinal.
Point direction,
And-
clock face.
We're back to clock face.
Altitude units, imperial.
And altitude
Double tap
units,
to change value.
you can toggle between imperial and metric. I personally understand altitudes in imperial, so I have mine set to that.
Astronomic units, imperial.
And astronomic
Double tap to
units
change
is the
value.
same thing. You have imperial, you have
Astronomic units, earth radii.
earth radii, and
Astronomic
Metric?
units, metric.
we'll be back to
Astronomic
imperial.
units, imperial.
So that's for the sun and moon distances and everything in that astronomic screen.
Pop-up timeout, 5 seconds.
And
Adjustable.
the pop-up timeout is
Swipe
for
up or
the
down with one
various
finger to
pop-up
adjust the value.
announcements. That's like checkpoint, arriving, and approaching announcements. They display on the screen in a little pop-up window, and this value controls how long they stay on screen. And people using speech may not actually care how long that stays on, so setting this value low might be better. You might notice that it also interferes if those announcements should say pop up as you're typing into, let's say, the fine point dialog. So having these ones stay on screen less is probably better in those cases.
Navigation,
Oh,
tab,
and
1
then
of 4.
that's the end of the display section. So I'll go back.
Coordinate units, DMS plus settings. Speech, button, display.
Okay.
Speech,
Now, speech,
button.
these are to control the speech synthesizer.
Selected, speech settings.
Speech settings.
Back button, speech settings. Heading, synthesizer, off.
Okay, the
Double tap to
synthesizer,
toggle
that
setting.
controls when Loadstone is in the background and the synthesizer is off, it will and you have voiceovers running, then it will use voiceover to try to speak and basically create a unified experience. So you don't have a different voice for voiceover and a different voice for Loadstone. But if you turn speech on, then it uses the system speech synthesizer, and that can sometimes cause a little bit more lag than just leaving it off.
Rate, 60%. Adjustable.
So this is speech rate.
Pitch, 33%. Volume,
And volume.
90%. Adjust English, Australia. Picker item, adjustable.
And this is the voices that you
Swipe
can
up or down with
adjust.
one finger to adjust the value. English, Australia. English, Australia.
And it's not cooperating.
English, Australia.
But yeah, you can generally change that to the voices that you have in your system.
Test speech, button.
And this will test what your settings are set to.
This is a speech synthesizer test.
Okay, the volume lowered a little bit there.
Navigation, tab. Test speech, button.
And now it doesn't want to come back to normal. Okay, so we'll go back to the next tab.
Settings, heading.
See if we can turn that back up.
Advanced. Tags field, advanced. Sounds, button. Speech, button.
Okay, now,
Sounds, button.
and here we have sounds.
Selected. Sounds,
In-
settings.
In
Back
here,
button.
this will allow you to edit the various sounds within Loadstone if you don't like the things that it's doing.
Sounds.
Now, it's
heading.
kind of sophisticated in here, and I haven't written the documentation for what's supposed to go here, but I'll give you an idea.
Error, button.
You can play it, so that's the sound for the error, and you can test this. And then
500, 230, 400, 170. Text field.
yeah, so there's
Double tap to
various
edit.
numbers. What it usually is a frequency number, a period, and a duration for a sound. So that's what these ones, and there's more
No
sophisticated
signal.
ones.
But 500, 2, signal.
And
709,
I'll show it-
weak signal. 400 point,
I'll show the
good signal.
approaching one.
700, approaching. V2,
So the
approaching.
approaching,
Button.
this one has a vibration associated with it. Actually,
V2, arriving.
the arriving
Button.
is a little nicer. That one has a vibration associated to it and a pattern. And the value...
503C number 4.500G4.500C number 5.490. Text field.
And in that
Double tap to
value,
edit.
there was the V for vibrate, and there was musical notes that actually played some musical tones with octave numbers and other various things. But as I said, this has to be documented somewhere. So that's what that pane does.
Settings. Tags filter.
No.
Button. Sounds. Button. Advanced.
Advanced.
Button.
These are settings that most users should not be playing with unless they're me and want to control program aspects, but you can.
That was his geek
Advanced
voice,
settings.
guys.
Settings. Back
Geek
button.
voice.
Basically, if you ask questions of these settings, I probably won't tell you about what they are, because in here there could be almost anything and it can do all sorts
Advanced
of things.
settings.
But
Heading.
I'll try to
Signal
explain.
threshold. 65 meters. Adjustable.
Signal threshold.
Slide
Here's
up or
what
down
you
with one finger
can.
to adjust the value.
Anything above 65 meters is considered no signal. So the signal monitor will say no signal if it goes above the threshold set in here. So 65, at least on my phone and my area, seems to be a pretty good value for this one.
Good signal threshold. 20 meters. Adjustable.
So the same thing
Slide
for
up or
good
down with one
signal.
finger to adjust the
Anything
value.
20 meters or below is considered to be...
Auto announce interval.
Whoops, no.
0. Good signal threshold.
Yeah.
20 meters.
Yeah, it's
Adjustable.
considered a good signel.
Swipe up or down with signal settle. 3 seconds.
Signal
Adjustable.
settle, if your signal
Swipe up or
state
down
is
with one finger to adjust the
fluctuating, for
value.
example, which it can do if the GPS conditions are bad, this is how long it will settle before announcing a state change. And 3 seconds seems to be a fairly reasonable value.
Starting search radius. 200 meters. Adjustable.
And this is
Swipe up
for
or down with one
the
finger to adjust
closest
the
point
value.
function. It starts off with a 200 meter radius and expands out. And the only reason you would ever adjust that is if, I don't know, you wanted a little better performance or wanted to see what would happen if it was a bigger or smaller radius. But a 200 meter radius seems to give a pretty good performance.
Minimum approach radius. 10 meters. Adjustable.
Minimum approach radius
Swipe up or down with one finger
is
to adjust the
another
value.
one that's a just in case you're approaching a point and your speed is so slow that the calculations are being thrown off. This is the minimum radius to the point that you could get before the approach announce will trigger.
Auto announce interval. 0 seconds.
Auto
Adjustable.
announce interval, it's for that
Swipe up or
much
down with one finger
hated
to adjust
auto
the
announce
value.
feature. And
Sean hates it.
I really hate it. And 0 means that the interval is automatically calculated based on your speed and distance away from the checkpoint that it's going to announce. But you can set this to a given interval and then it will start annoying you every X number of seconds.
Searching sound interval. 1.5 seconds.
So
Adjustable.
this is how often the
Swipe up
searching
or down with one
sound will
finger
be
to adjust the
played
value.
when it's doing a find point search. So it's defaulted to 1.5 seconds.
Stationary threshold. 0.25722 meters per second. Adjustable.
That is
Swipe up or down with one finger
a
to
value
adjust the
that is
value.
attempting to compensate for what's called GPS drift. When the phone is sitting still, for example, or any GPS receiver, there's a bit of drift. It makes it seem like it's moving back and forth in random directions. And so the stationary threshold basically says ignore anything that's too slow. So you have to make sure this value is well below 1 meter per second, because that would give you a speed of about 3 kilometers per hour, and that's well within walking speed. So you probably don't want to adjust this value too much, but if you found something that worked better for your particular receiver.
Navigation. Tab.
And
1
that's
of
the
4.
end of that tab. And that's all I'm going to cover in this particular tutorial, because the other settings within the settings tab, they are to do with various output formats and tag filters. So that will be part 2 of the settings tutorial.
All right.
Yeah.
So part 2 is coming up. Just to remind everybody, lodestone-gps.com, where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and most of these videos, if not all, will be transcribed into HTML for those of you who don't want to watch the video. All right, till the next time.
Cut!